The glittering lights of Hollywood, the roaring crowds at stadium concerts, and the polished personas of global icons often make it seem as though celebrities belong to an entirely different species. A race of human beings born under a special star and destined from their very first breath to walk the red carpet. We see them on screens large and small, perfectly coiffed, flawlessly spoken, and wrapped in an aura of untouchable mystique that makes it almost impossible to imagine them doing anything ordinary. We forget that before the multi-million-dollar contracts, the private jets, the legions of adoring fans, and the relentless flashbulbs of the paparazzi, these larger-than-life figures were just regular people navigating the mundane realities of everyday life. They were the quiet kids sitting in the back of the high school art classroom, the energetic teenagers flipping burgers at the local fast food joint, the shy musicians recording humble demos in dusty southern studios, and the neighborhood babysitters who watched over local kids on Friday nights. They walked the same cracked sidewalks, suffered through the same awkward teenage phases, attended the same neighborhood churches, and played the same video games as the rest of us, completely unaware of the massive global fame that awaited them just around the corner of destiny. It is this fascinating, hidden chapter of their lives that brings us together today as we dive deep into an extraordinary collection of real-life encounters from ordinary citizens who knew these icons before the world ever learned their names. These are not the polished public relations narratives crafted by agents and managers, but genuine, raw, and sometimes surprising memories from former classmates, childhood neighbors, old family friends, and co-workers who witnessed the humble beginnings of future legends. Before we unveil these incredible stories and peel back the curtain on the secret histories of the world's biggest stars, take a quick moment to ensure you are fully connected with our community by hitting that subscribe button, turning on notifications, and joining us for this incredible journey through time and memory, because you will not want to miss a single detail of what is to come. Imagine walking into a high school art room decades ago, long before digital streaming or modern rock festivals dominated the cultural landscape, and sitting next to a remarkably quiet, introverted young man who possessed a brilliant but deeply macabre artistic vision. To the average student, he was just another shy teenager with an unusual knack for drawing dark, intricate, and haunting imagery that boundary-pushing artists often gravitate toward. Nobody in that classroom could have possibly predicted that this soft-spoken young artist named Adam Jones would grow up to become the visionary guitarist and visual mastermind behind one of the most influential progressive metal bands in music history. The atmosphere in that high school art department was thick with teenage creativity, but the real magic happened when another familiar face would stroll by after class to meet up with him. That other student was none other than Tom Morello, another future guitar deity who would eventually redefine the sound of political rock and alternative metal. Back then, they were not rock gods or icons of counterculture, they were simply too good. Genuine guys who went to high school together, constantly carrying their guitars around the hallways like shields and badges of honor, deeply bonded by their shared love for music and creative expression. Those who shared that art class remember the pure, unfiltered talent radiating from them, yet they remained completely grounded, polite, and unassuming, leaving their peers with nothing but fond memories of a time when the future legends of rock were just two high school friends dreaming of making noise. Meanwhile, in a completely different corner of the country, deep within the humid, soulful atmosphere of a small gospel recording studio in Georgia, an entirely different kind of musical history was quietly being written. Long before he wore rhinestone jumpsuits, shook his hips on national television, or became the undisputed king of rock and roll, a young Elvis Presley walked through the doors of that modest studio. He was not yet a cultural phenomenon or a symbol of a generational rebellion. He was just a young man looking for a place to sing the music that spoke directly to his soul. The grandfather of one of our contributors worked at that very studio and spent time with the future legend during those early formative sessions. His memory of the young Elvis stands in stark contrast to the loud, flamboyant image that would later define his public career. In those quiet moments between takes, Elvis was described as incredibly respectful, deeply polite, and almost painfully shy, speaking with a gentle humility that endeared him to everyone in the room. He was a simple boy from the South who treated the studio staff with genuine deference, holding a deep reverence for the gospel music he was recording and showing absolutely no signs of the massive, world-altering ego that so often consumes those who rise to such astronomical heights of fame. As we look back at these fascinating glimpses into the past, it becomes clear that the path to stardom is rarely predictable, and the traits people exhibit in their youth often contrast sharply with their future public personas. In the chapters to follow, we will continue this captivating exploration, uncovering more first-hand accounts that challenge what we think we know about these iconic figures. We will reveal how future movie stars handled high school drama, how pop divas acted before they topped the music charts, and how ordinary neighborhood kids transformed into global symbols of success. The stories get even more intense, surprising, and deeply personal as we move forward into the next segment of our report, where the main content will be fully revealed with all the tension, drama, and unexpected twists that define the human journey toward greatness. Stay tuned, because the veil of celebrity is about to be lifted even further. The journey from ordinary citizen to global icon is rarely a straight line, and as we push deeper into the memories of those who witnessed these stars before the glare of the spotlight found them, the stories become significantly more intense, revealing, and filled with unexpected tension. High school hallways and neighborhood blocks serve as the ultimate testing grounds for character, and the people who shared these spaces with future celebrities often saw sides of them that have since been carefully scrubbed from their official biographies. Consider the chaotic, high-energy world of a young Robert Downey Jr. Long before he became the suave, definitive face of a multi-billion-dollar cinematic universe. To the students who walked the same high school halls as him, he was not a polished Hollywood leading man, but a wild, rebellious force of nature, embodying the absolute peak of the untamed Gen X lifestyle. Those who knew him back then remember a teenager who frequently found himself in intense physical altercations in the school corridors, carrying a fiery, unpredictable energy that seemed to constantly pull him toward trouble. When his parents were away, his house transformed into the epicenter of legendary crowded parties that stretched late into the night, defining the chaotic freedom of a youth lived without boundaries. It was a turbulent, fast-paced existence that hinted at the deep, raw intensity he would later channel into his legendary acting career. Long before he conquered his personal demons and achieved global cinematic redemption, while some future stars were channeling their energy into rebellion, others were commanding the attention of their peers in highly structured, competitive environments that required a completely different set of skills. In the early 90s, a young Eva Longoria was navigating her high school years not as a glamorous television star or fashion icon, but as a dedicated drum major leading the school marching band with a clarinet in hand. A freshman who shared overlapping friend groups with the future actress vividly recalls seeing her daily in the crowded hallways, carrying the natural authority and confidence required to lead a massive group of teenage musicians. Marching band commands can be notoriously confusing, leading to chaotic formations and frequent mistakes. Yet when the freshman section completely blundered her directions, the 2 years older Longoria showed a level of grace, kindness, and patience that left a lasting impression. She chose encouragement over punishment, demonstrating a sweet, approachable nature that contrasted sharply with the cutthroat, competitive atmosphere often found in high school social hierarchies at the exact same time. A completely different kind of high school drama was unfolding in another part of the country, showcasing the intense rivalries and emotional outbursts that can happen when future stars collide. A former student recalls the absolute chaos that erupted during lunch one day because of a future Hollywood starlet named Angie Harmon. Years before she was a famous model and television actress, Harmon was described by her peers as an incredibly intense, dominant personality who wielded her popularity like a weapon. In a moment of pure high school theater, Harmon reportedly threw an entire tuna fish sandwich across the cafeteria at another girl, solely because she had set her sights on that girl's boyfriend and refused to let anyone stand in her way. Yet, in that very same school grade sat Stephanie March, who would later find fame on crime television dramas. March was the polar opposite of the explosive Harmon, remembered by her classmates as incredibly sweet, brilliantly smart, and what they described as the ultimate undercover hottie of the century. Quietly maintaining her dignity, while the dramatic storm of teenage politics swirled furiously around her, the contrast between these future stars only grows sharper when we look at the pop music world, where the sweet innocence of childhood often collides with the harsh realities of the entertainment industry. In Canada, classmates of a young Nelly Furtado remember a highly articulate, cool, and incredibly talented girl who dominated the school's creative scene long before she achieved international chart-topping success. She was the star ukulele player in elementary school, a standout vocalist in the choir, and even took on the demanding role of the narrator in a junior production of a famous musical. Preserved forever on an old VHS tape hidden away in a classmate's closet. By junior high, she had transitioned effortlessly to the trombone in the school band and earned a spot on the dance team, maintaining a cool, polite demeanor that made her widely respected among her peers. But the road to fame is not always a sweet success story, as evidenced by the deeply tragic, tension-filled journey of a young girl named Caitlin Taylor Love, who would later star on the Disney Channel. Growing up, Caitlin was known in her hometown as one of the popular, incredibly stuck-up kids in elementary school, backed by a mother who constantly bragged to neighbors about her daughter's impending stardom on a national television talent show. The entire town gathered around their television screens to watch her big debut, but in a crushing twist of reality television editing, her actual performance never aired, and the network even managed to get the name of her hometown completely wrong. Desperate for success, the family abruptly packed their bags and moved to Hollywood, but the sudden shift into the high-stakes entertainment industry shattered their lives, leading to a bitter divorce for the parents and a devastating struggle with substance abuse for the young star. Years later, old family friends spotted her far from the glamorous lights of Hollywood, singing for small crowds in a local hometown bar. A sobering reminder of the immense human cost that often hides behind the desperate pursuit of fame and fortune. As these stories reveal, the domestic lives and early relationships of celebrities are frequently filled with a heavy, underlying tension that the public rarely sees. In a quiet apartment building, neighbors lived side by side with Amber Heard during the early days of her career, when she resided with her then-girlfriend, the photographer Tasia Van Ree. The atmosphere in the building was often thick with friction, as the photographer made it abundantly clear that she harbored a deep dislike for the younger neighborhood kids who played in the common areas. Yet, amidst that domestic tension, Amber Heard herself was remembered as remarkably friendly, warm, and approachable, even stepping in to babysit the neighborhood children on multiple occasions. She would walk through the neighborhood with her tiny dog named Pistol, who would playfully chase the local kids down the block, creating a bizarrely normal domestic memory that stands in stark contrast to the highly publicized, toxic legal battles that would define her life decades later. Similarly filled with unexpected connections is the story of a family whose parents were incredibly close friends with the notorious figure skater Tonya Harding and her partner Jeff Gillel. Why? Long before the sports world was rocked by one of the most shocking, violent scandals in athletic history, these individuals were just ordinary people planning a life together, culminating in a wedding where the contributor's own father stood at the altar as the best man for the controversial couple, deeply embedded in a history that would soon become global front-page news. The closer we look at these pre-fame lives, the more we realize that these individuals were surrounded by people who saw them in their most vulnerable, unvarnished moments, long before their images were managed by global corporations. The tension between who they were then and who they became now is what makes these memories so incredibly haunting and fascinating. In the third and final part of our report, we will push past the high school drama and early struggles to fully reveal the core of these transformations. We will look closely at the true legends of music, film, and science, exploring how childhood traits blossomed into extraordinary success, and examining the profound impact these individuals left on the ordinary people who once knew them as just another face in the crowd. The final transformation from an ordinary neighborhood acquaintance into a globally recognized figure represents one of the most profound shifts in human experience, leaving a lasting impact on the friends, neighbors, and family members who watched it happen in real time. For those who stayed behind in the quiet towns and ordinary suburbs, witnessing a familiar face achieve historical greatness creates a surreal bridge between the mundane and the extraordinary. Consider the incredible history of a family whose great-grandparents lived in absolute anonymity alongside one of the greatest explorers in human history, Neil Armstrong. Long before he commanded the historic Apollo 11 mission, stepped off the lunar module ladder and left the very first human footprint on the dusty surface of the moon, Armstrong was simply a dedicated, hard-working aerospace engineer collaborating closely with colleagues at NASA. A great-grandfather of our contributor worked side by side with him during those intense early years of the space race, forging a deep social bond that led to frequent intimate dinners at each other's homes. In those casual evenings far removed from the cold calculations of rocket physics and global political pressure, Armstrong was remembered as a warm, charming, and thoroughly engaging dinner guest. The contributor's great-grandmother fondly recounted a playful night where she jokingly engaged in a game of footsie with the future space legend under the dinner table, a deeply human, light-hearted moment shared with a man who would soon become an eternal symbol of human advancement and courage. Similarly grounded in the rich cultural history of ordinary neighborhoods are the legendary musical figures who grew up surrounded by communities that recognized their genius long before the world did. In the vibrant, highly competitive musical landscape of Detroit, a grandmother and her young siblings found themselves living in the direct orbit of true musical royalty. Long before he revolutionized the music industry with his profound songwriting, multi-instrumental mastery, and countless Grammy Awards, a young Stevie Wonder was just a local kid hanging out with the neighborhood youth. Together with the contributor's family, they would sit quietly and listen intently to the iconic vocal group The Temptations rehearse their legendary harmonies in local Detroit spaces, soaking in the foundational sounds of Motown before those sounds took over the global airwaves. Years later, in the notoriously tough neighborhood of West Compton, a young Kendrick Lamar was forging his own path toward musical immortality. Neighbors who watched him grow up remember an exceptionally quiet, observant, and deeply respectful boy who absorbed the complex realities of life around him. What truly elevates his story, however, is how he responded to the massive, culture-shifting fame that followed his commercial breakthrough. Unlike many who cut ties with their past, Lamar famously refused to change his core values, continuously bringing his childhood friends on global tours, heavily supporting the up-and-coming local artists from his hometown, and regularly walking through his old neighborhood completely unaccompanied by private security teams. He frequently returns to the hood to distribute shoes, resources, and genuine encouragement to the local children, cementing his legacy not just as a brilliant lyricist, but as a remarkably humble, authentic human being who never forgot the streets that shaped his soul. The world of cinema offers equally powerful examples of future icons who maintained an unbelievable level of normalcy during their formative years, baffling the classmates who expected them to follow entirely different paths. In a highly competitive New York school, students shared classrooms with a young Natalie Portman while she was already starring in major Hollywood motion pictures. Yet, despite her growing international fame, her classmates recall that absolutely nothing about her behavior changed. If you did not explicitly know she was a famous actress from her appearances on screen, you would never have guessed it from her daily interactions. She resolutely kept the exact same childhood friends, maintained the same relationship with her high school boyfriend, and remained the same tiny, deeply reserved, an incredibly smart girl who simply happened to be in the classroom less frequently due to her demanding filming schedules. A similar sense of grounded normalcy surrounded a young Chris Evans, who lived down the street from a local family and regularly served as their trusted neighborhood babysitter. His mother was deeply embedded in the local community theater scene, directing the plays at the town's high school, which naturally drew Evans toward the craft of acting. To the kids he watched over and the neighbors who saw him daily, he was just a completely normal, friendly teenager who enjoyed regular high school activities. Nothing about his everyday demeanor loudly screamed that he was destined to become a global cinematic superhero or the physical embodiment of Captain America. He was simply a talented, reliable local dude who happened to be exceptionally good at acting, proving that sometimes global fame is merely the natural byproduct of a normal person mastering a specific beautiful craft. However, the path of early genius does not always lead to a stable, heroic conclusion, and some who witnessed the early days of future icons were left with memories filled with profound sorrow. In the bustling music scene of the early 2000s, close friends shared their daily lives with a young, unknown Amy Winehouse long before her distinct voice and tragic personal life captured the attention of the entire world. Back then, she was dating a close friend of the contributor and was remembered as an incredibly fun, vibrantly full of life, and totally hyperactive young woman who radiated a chaotic but infectious energy. While everyone around her acknowledged her truly staggering, undeniable vocal abilities, her friends would often affectionately roll their eyes whenever she passionately insisted that she was going to become a massive, world-famous singer. The rapid, overwhelming explosion of her career eventually caused them to completely lose touch, and the deeply tragic, heavily altered version of Winehouse that the public witnessed at the end of her short life was utterly unrecognizable to the friends who had loved the hyperactive, joyful girl from the local neighborhood blocks. For others, the realization that a childhood friend has become a major celebrity comes as a complete hilarious shock that upends everything they thought they knew about their peers' intellectual future. In a standard American high school, classmates spent their days with a young Edward Norton, remembering him as the absolute sweetest, most polite kid who happened to be a bit nerdy and a fierce competitor at local trivia games. Years after graduation, a grandmother pulled out a local newspaper article to show her son, Norton's former classmate, the stunning news of his latest major Hollywood film role. Both the father and grandmother were completely paralyzed with shock, as they had collectively assumed his immense brains and sharp trivia skills would have naturally led him to become a distinguished United States ambassador or a high-ranking corporate executive. These incredible, deeply human accounts remind us that the global celebrities we see today on glamorous red carpets were once just ordinary threads in the fabric of everyday communities. They were shaped by the normal interactions, the local rivalries, the quiet encourages, and the simple moments they shared with everyday people long before the world demanded they become larger-than-life icons. Their journeys prove that extraordinary destinies often begin in the most ordinary places, leaving behind a trail of unforgettable memories for the people who knew them when they were just another face in the crowd.